CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello, welcome to CGTN. This is our special coverage on China's annual political season, the two sessions. Live from Beijing, I'm Pan Deng.
I'm Wang Mengmeng. Lawmakers will wrap up their session at the Great Hall of the People today. After about a week of deliberation, deputies of the National People's Congress, or NPC, will vote on the draft decision on the amendment to the legislation law.
Lawmakers will also vote on major issues of governmental work for this year. Chinese President Xi Jinping and NPC Standing Committee Chairman Zhao Leji will address the closing meeting. After the NPC session closes, Premier Li Qiang is set to brief the press on key issues. We'll bring you live coverage on that.
And for our discussion, we have two guests in the studio, Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Suzhou University, and Lawrence Brahm, Senior International Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, a think tank based in Beijing. Welcome, gentlemen, to our program.
Thank you.
Our special coverage is also being live streamed on our social media platforms. You can also log on to our app to stay tuned.
And right, let's get the latest from our reporter Zhou Jiaxin at the venue of the session. Great to see you there, Jiaxin. So what's happening right now as we speak, and what are some of the items that will come up over the next few hours?
Yes, Mom, as mentioned, the top legislature is wrapping up the annual session today, and after 6 plenary meetings starting from March 5th, today we're expecting some 3,000 deputies voting to adopt a decision to amend China's legislation law. Now, the latest changes this time highlight the implementation and oversight of the Constitution, as well as what China calls the whole process of people's democracy to better protect human rights and social fairness and justice. So once adopted, Chinese President Xi Jinping will sign a presidential order to promulgate the decision. Meanwhile, lawmakers will also approve the government work report this year, as well as work reports of the NPC Standing Committee, the Supreme People's Court, the Supreme People's Procuratorate, and they will also approve a slew of reports on the implementation of the 2022 reports, and also the budgets from the central and local, respectively, as well as those draft plan for 2023. On the agenda, the newly elected chairman of the 14th NPC Standing Committee, Zhao Leji, will address the meeting. He's going to review what's being achieved during the first session. And also, we're expecting Chinese President Xi Jinping to deliver a keynote speech likely about striving in unity to build China into a modern socialist country. And she was elected President of the People's Republic of China and the chairman of the Central Military Commission on Friday, followed by the key appointments within the government over the past weekend. And also, after the conclusion of the sessions, Li Qiang will meet the press, where the new premier is going to talk more details about China's economic plan in 2023, such as measures to stabilize the economic growth, which the government work report has set the target around 5% for the world's second largest economy. And he's also going to discuss the measures like support policies to expand the domestic demand, revitalize the rural development, advance the country's manufacturing high-tech industry, as well as widening its opening up. So aside from the NPC resolutions, this morning is going to basically packed with some very important messages we are going to hear from Chinese top leaders. Mama.
We'll certainly keep an eye on that. Thank you so much, Zhou Jiaxin, for us there.
After a busy week, China's political season is coming to an end. Wang Haiyang explains what the NPC, the country's top legislature, has achieved over the past few days.
This year's two sessions bears great significance, not only because new leaders have been elected and named, but also because 2023 marks the first year of fully implementing the guiding principles of the 20th CPC National Congress. The deputies of the 14th National People's Congress cast their votes for the new leaders of the People's Republic of China. They elected Xi Jinping as the President of China and the Chairman of the Central Military Commission, Xi then made a public pledge of allegiance to the constitution.
我宣誓，忠于中华人民共和国宪法。
I pledge my allegiance to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, to safeguard the Constitution's authority, and fulfill my legal obligations, be loyal to the country and the people, be committed and honest in my duty, accept the people's supervision, and work for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful.
Li Qiang has been endorsed as the premier of the State Council. The members of the 14th NPC Standing Committee, with Zhao Leji as its chairman, have also been elected. Meanwhile, the National People's Congress has passed several drafts, including a reform plan of the state institutions. Authorities said the reform aims to improve efficiency and tackle current risks. The plan includes steps to restructure the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, and to set up a national administration for financial regulation to supervise financial activities at all levels.
This is a very crucial for China's economy. So we have to see that the China's economic development will be further safeguarded and also will be in a stabilized way.
A new regulator for data governance will also be created. The NPC has also been deliberating a draft amendment to the legislation law. Authorities said the amendment is expected to further improve the legislative system and enhance the quality and efficiency of legislation. The draft stresses whole process people's democracy during the legislative process. This year's government work report delivered at the first plenary meeting of the NPC session sets China's annual GDP growth at around 5%. It also aims to create around 12 million urban jobs and secure an urban unemployment rate of 5.5%. Inflation will also be capped at 3% this year. The Chinese government will also play a leading role in coordinating national resources to strengthen the research and development of core technologies for key industries.
Now, for more insights, let's talk to our studio guest. Gentlemen, as we know, this is the first year for China to fully implement those guiding principles set at the 20th CPC National Congress last October. So from this year's two sessions, what are some of the clear policy signals you've been getting? Professor Gao.
Well, I think this year's two sessions are extraordinary because this is the first year of the 5-year term. And then this is also the first year of the next 10-year terms, because normally with the establishment of the new government headed by the new premier, his term most likely will last all the way to 2033. Now, the coming 5 years in particular will be crucially important for China, because I would say by the end of this 5-year term, around 2028 to no more than 2030, the overall size of the Chinese economy measured by official exchange rate will be the largest in the world, with no surprises. And that will have profound political as well as geopolitical significance and consequences. And how China can manage a smooth process leading towards around 2030 without major disruptions either at home or abroad, and managing expectations of the Chinese people on the one hand and also the rest of the world on the other hand will be crucial, because we expect that the Chinese economy will steadily increase, and we also want to make sure that no disruptions in the world will actually take place because of the steady and continued development of the Chinese economy. And how China can handle all the headwinds created, especially on the global scene, will be crucially important, because whatever we do at home in China has a global consequence right now, and in the coming 5 years it will be particularly felt that China's global impact will be more and more on the increase.
Well, this year's NPC comes at a critical juncture in time. As you mentioned, it reviews the achievement not only in the past year, but also in the past decade. And then we are seeing this blueprint being put out for this year and also the next 5 years and beyond. Mr. Brahm, what are some of the signals that have been most notable to you when it comes to top-level decision-making, including the choice of strategy and overall direction?
Well, we have a new leadership and, of course, a new policy framework that they're now implementing. And the world is looking at this because, as Victor just said, what China does impacts the world. And now in the post-COVID era, where we're seeing in continued fractioning, if not deglobalization, of global trading networks and processes, how China develops its domestic industry, where it puts its finance, where it puts its investment, how it's going to shift from low quality production to high quality production, how it's going to integrate its production and its currency with the partners of the Belt and Road will all have a global impact. So the world is watching right now to see the navigational direction that is going to come from China. China impacts the world, and the decisions that impact China are being made right down the street at the National People's Congress.
So talking about high quality development, what would you say are some of the major directions you've been getting from this year's 2 sessions?
Well, this is really the big takeaway from Premier Li Keqiang's government work report. We talked about 3% growth last year, and that's not bad given the COVID situation.
And the size of the Chinese economy itself.
It's actually quite amazing given what they've been able to do to restart the economy in the post-COVID era. And now they've fixed 5% as the target for this year. This is really sending us the message that there's a shift from the super high growth rates to a higher quality growth. It's not about volume. It's about quality, and it's also about the nature of China's shifting industrial development. Before, China was the factory of the world. Then it became the investment bank of the world. Now it's going to be driving as the technology center of the world, from R&D, new technology applications for environmental protection, which is absolutely essential. It is technology that will convert our energy systems over from fossil fuels to green energy. It will depend entirely on technology and finance. And these are the areas where we can see particular impetus, and also quality of life. For the past decades, China has been fighting to reduce poverty and eliminate poverty. Now you have a situation where you have growing aspirations of the Chinese people, so their quality of life is going to be increasing, especially as the next generation's aspirations are even higher than their parents. So this means a fundamental shift in the entire nature of China's economic strategy, and that strategy will impact the world.
And one of the priorities for the government is to put China's economy back on track. This rebound in economic recovery, where do you think it's most likely to come from?
Well, indeed, as Mr. Brahm just now mentioned, the Chinese economy is targeted to rebound by 5% this year, which is really very impressive given the fact that, especially when we compare the expected Chinese growth rate with almost all the other developed countries in the world. Now, I would say the growth need to come from mostly technologically driven innovations, meaning the Chinese economy is going through a very profound transformation from, let's say, 40 years ago, it's very much labor incentive. Now we want to make sure it's very much technologically intensive, and then innovation and breakthrough and creativity will more and more become the dominant thing. And this is a very important part of the so-called high quality development, because as Mr. Brahm said, and I completely agree with him, that we can no longer just expect to grow by volumes. Quality will be more important, and quality cannot be sustained unless we really put a greater reliance on science and technology. And this is exactly why the Ministry of Science and Technology, which was actually formed right immediately after the start of the Chinese modernization drive in 1978, had been, as a result of this NPC, almost completely been revamped. And it has given away some of the administrative workload to other ministries.
So lots of issues to discuss this year. But now let's get the latest from the ongoing closing meeting of this year's NPC session. The National People's Congress has adopted a resolution to approve this year's government work report. They have also voted to adopt a decision on amending the legislation law.
And one of the key items under deliberation at this year's NPC session is the draft amendment to the legislation law. It stipulates the process of creating national laws, government regulations, and local laws in this country. Let's take a look at some of the highlights.
One of the major changes is its emphasis on whole process people's democracy. National legislature said every link in the legislative process should reflect people's voices and reality at the grassroots level. To achieve this, the draft stipulates that local legislative outreach offices should be set up to solicit opinions from the grassroots and people from all walks of life. It also proposes to systemize the protection of human rights in legislative work. Meanwhile, the draft includes detailed requirements for constitutional review and the recording and reviewing of legislative and normative documents. It also introduces an emergency lawmaking procedure for the NPC Standing Committee, where a bill may be put to vote after a single deliberation at the Standing Committee. And the draft adds provisions on regional coordination on legislation, which had already been adopted in recent years by local governments for ecological conservation.
So, gentlemen, the NPC has just adopted the amendment to legislation law. Remind us the significance here, why this particular piece of legislation is so important.
Well, we need to recall that about 40 years ago, China was very much of a planned economy. Everything was done by government fiat. And now, after 40 years or so, China is becoming more and more of a market economy. And then the rule of law is becoming more and more entrenched. However, when you talk about the rule of law, the crucial important thing will be the laws and regulations adopted not only by the central government, but also by government entities as government regulations, and also, given the size and the complexities of China, the provincial legislatures, for example, as well as sometimes the city governments, can all come up with all kinds of administrative rules and regulations. Therefore, in China, you have a hierarchy structure of laws. At the very top, it's by the central government, headed by the Chinese constitution, of course. And then you have all kinds of NPC adopted national laws, provincially adopted local laws, as well as all kinds of government regulations. Now, in coming up with this hierarchy, and also in terms of keep amending the laws and adopting new laws, what is the best process? Now, in many other countries, they have a legislature, they have a Congress, for example, and they have the dominance of the power in pushing through the legislations. In China, we have what we call the whole process democracy, meaning people's democracy, meaning everyone involved, all walks of life. And then in China, in addition to the Communist Party of China, we also have 8 other democratic parties, as well as the very big Chamber of Commerce, composed of all the private enterprises, and then an even larger group of people of what we call without political affiliations. Now, everyone, all walks of life, all these entities are encouraged not only to give opinion, but also to comment and then to edit, for example, and sometimes to really take the initiative to do investigations, to do field studies, you name it, so that opinions and viewpoints from various quarters of life can be solicited, gathered together, centralized, processed, and then be put into the legislative work. The Chinese legislation does not take place in a vacuum or just within the 4 corners of the National People's Congress or provincial People's Congress, etc. It actually branches out to all walks of life. And if anyone is interested in making his or her views known, there is a process, there is a procedure for that opinion to be generated, to be pushed, solicited, consulted, and eventually reflected one way or another in the final legislative work. This is exactly what we call the whole process, people's democracy. And this really sets China apart from all the other developed countries, of course, and then comparing China with all the other emerging markets, for example, China is also very, very extraordinary and very special in a sense. Now, we put a value on these Chinese characteristics. However, I think the rest of the world should also feel comfortable because China has no desire to impose our way of passing through and going through, pushing through legislations in our own system, for example, onto any other country. Because we do believe that different countries have different circumstances and different challenges, and what works for China may be just extraordinary for China, and it may not have general application to any other countries. But in China, this whole process, people's democracy, really counts and really is the basis of why we have so much productivity and efficiency in China for the past 44 years. And then with this amendment of the legislation law, I hope in the coming 5 years, more and more laws and regulations, including government regulations, etc., will need to be drafted and adopted and put into implementation so that the Chinese economic development will not be burdened down by either lack of necessary laws and regulations or by outdated laws and regulations. Everything needs to be amended almost constantly in light of the changing circumstances and changing opportunities and challenges in China.
Now let's get the latest from the ongoing closing meeting. Lawmakers have just approved a report on the implementation of the 2022 Plan for National Economic and Social Development, as well as a draft plan for this year. They have also approved a report on the execution of the central and local budgets for 2022, as well as the draft budgets for this year. So let's continue to talk about the authority of the NPC, which is the highest organ in China's state power. Mr. Abraham, we've been talking about the amendment to the legislation law. Now lawmakers are exercising the right to approve the budgets. What does this tell about Chinese democracy, as Professor Gao just elaborated a bit?
Well, first of all, in the previous planning system, policy was the prerogative. Now, if you're talking about a market economy, it's law that sets the rules of the game. And one of the really significant things about the changes we're seeing taking place right now is in the past, you had many different ministries and many different departments, national level, you had local level, and very often each was issuing its own rules, its own regulations. There were test rules that were later recalled, new ones that went, and you had a coordination problem. And very often things got stuck because you'd have something happening in one department would say this is the rule and another department would say we have another regulation. So I think what we see happening now is an attempt to streamline all that. Before it was all dependent upon policy coordination, leaders intervening and saying, well, this time we'll do it this way, not that way. But now, if you're going to really have a legal system, you have to have a streamlining of the legislation. There has to be coordinated legislation, both on the national level and also national and local. I think that's what we're seeing happening right now. Moreover, you also have the ability with this amendment to be able to accelerate the legal process, to streamline things. And we're living in an increasingly volatile world. Things are happening that were once upon a time unprecedented, unthinkable. And the ability to respond quickly, the ability to meet challenges and not get bogged down in a legislative process or debate. You know, a lot of Western commentators are saying, oh, checks and balances. But sometimes checks and balances are not all that efficient, especially when politics becomes like a kind of alternative sport entertainment where you have fighting over issues, where it's not about solving problems. It's about which side or which party can win or can show that they've gotten the most points out of a debate. That's not helping people. And I think right now the question is efficient response to changing conditions and circumstances in a world where those circumstances are changing very, very quickly, where volatility is really the new normal.
Yeah, and the revisions this time came 8 years after the legislation law was first amended
Right.
8 years ago in 2015. So what are some of the specific changes, Professor Gao, if you may, to explain to our viewers, and in what ways will it have a far-reaching impact on China's legal framework?
I think the emphasis on establishing and beefing up the so-called outreach offices, which may actually penetrate to the lower levels of the government and then the lower levels of society at large, for example, is very important because especially for NPC, the legislative work should not be just the monopoly of the central government. It actually has a direct impact on people's daily life, on how businesses are conducted at all levels of the analysis. So there should be a process where viewpoints, opinions, or even criticisms, etc., need to be gathered and checked out and funneled up and down, for example, eventually whenever they are rational and reasonable, for example, being incorporated into the whole system. So these outreach offices will be very important. Allow me to use one example. We know in 2022, the British government adopted a mini budget, which eventually became a fiasco. And it created one crisis after another, not only in Britain, but in many other quarters at large. And Britain actually suffered a great deal from this mishandled mini budget. Now, I would say one thing. In the Chinese legislative work, this kind of disaster will never happen. Why? Because before any such budget or major legislative work will be adopted, there will be a whole process which is being beefed up by the amendment this time, which will need to solicit all the relevant viewpoints, not only just from the government, but also from, as we mentioned, different democratic parties, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, which is very important because the private economy accounts for about 90% of all the employment in China. So it's very, very profound. And then they also need to talk to, for example, the foreign invested companies, the multinationals, you name it, and everything needs to be solicited, vetted, and then verified again and again. So it's a very long and complicated process, but it's very efficiently done. So eventually, I think, the final version will also need to be circulated to the relevant decision makers so that everyone will have a final chance to see whether there is anything which stands out in a disorderly manner, for example, to make sure everything is vetted. And then once it is put into execution, lo and behold, what we expect is efficiency and a productivity, for example, rather than one fiasco after another, one crisis after another. I think this sets the Chinese way of doing legislation and major government decisions in sharp contrast to what the British did in 2022, at least involving the mini budget. And then if we look at other major countries, wow, there are so many gridlock, for example, in their legislative work. And in the US Congress, for example, sometimes the Republican House of Representatives fight against the democratically controlled Senate, for example.
Now let's cross live to the Great Hall of the People. We're bringing you live footage from inside Great Hall of the People.
Now, please allow me to invite President of the People's Republic of China, Comrade Xi Jinping, to deliver an important speech.
Fellow
Fellow deputies,
这次大会
I was elected at this session to continue to serve as the President of the People's Republic of China. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the trust placed on me by all deputies and Chinese people of all ethnic groups. It is my third time to take on this great position of a PRC president. The people's trust is my prime force to drive me forward. It's also weighty responsibility on me. I will faithfully fulfill my responsibilities empowered by the Constitution by taking the needs of the country as my mission and the people's interest as my working criterion. I will be diligent at work and stay devoted and dedicated, and will absolutely not betray the great trust from all deputies and Chinese people of all ethnic groups. Fellow deputies, Chinese civilization with more than 5,000 years of history has created countless glorious, but also experienced many hardships. Since the modern time began, China was gradually reduced to a semi-colonial, semi-feudal society and suffered from bullying of the foreign powers. The country was fallen apart, rife with conflict and wars. The people were subjected to great pain. Since the very day of its founding, the Communist Party of China has united and allied closely the Chinese people of all ethnic groups to carry out 100-year struggle. We have finally washed away the national humility to humiliation, and Chinese people has been the master of its own destination. The Chinese nation has gone through a tremendous transformation that it has stood up, grown rich, and is becoming strong, setting the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation into an irreversible historical course. From now to the mid of this century, to build a modern socialist country in all respects and advance the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is the central task for the entire party and the whole Chinese people. The relay baton of a strong country building and realizing rejuvenation is now in the hands of our generation. Followed the strategic plans set out by the 20th National Party Congress. We should ensure a coordinated implementation of 5-sphered integrated plan and a 4-pronged comprehensive strategy. Accelerate a Chinese modernization drive. Work in solidarity and with fortitude, brave to break new ground. On the new journey, we will make achievements to live up to the times, to the history, and to the people, and make our generation's due contribution to promote the building of a strong nation and realization of national rejuvenation. Fellow deputies, on the new journey toward such goals, we should unswervingly uphold high-quality development. We should apply new development philosophy in full, in the right way, and in all fields of endeavor. Speed up to foster a new development paradigm, and further implement the strategy of developing the country through science and education, and the strategy of strengthening the country through talents, and also promote innovation-driven development. And we should also enhance science and technology, self-reliance and strengths, promote industrial transformation and upgrading, advance urban, rural, and regional coordinated development, and to see that the economic and social development in a green and low-carbon manner. And we should also to realize that our economy achieve the effective increase in quality and the reasonable growth in its quantity. So by doing so, we can keep increasing our country in terms of economic and technological strength and composite national strengths. We should always uphold the people-centered development strategy. To build a modern socialist country in all respects, people hold the key. We should actively develop whole process people's democracy, uphold the unity between the leadership of the party, the running of the country by the people, and law-based governance. We should improve the system of the people as masters of the country, embody the people's will, and safeguard the people's rights. Thus, we can fully galvanize people's initiative and creativity of proactive participation. We should implement the people-centered development philosophy, refine distribution system, improve social security system, and strengthen basic public services. And we should also meet people's basic needs and also solve people's problem issues with urgent difficulties. Therefore, we can let more accomplishment of modernization benefit more people and entire Chinese people in a favorable manner and fairer manner, so we can make more visible and substantial progress in advancing common prosperity for all. We should further consolidate the great unity of the Chinese people of all ethnic groups, as well as sons and daughters of the Chinese nation at home and abroad, so we can mobilize all positive factors and amass a boundless might for the cause of a strong nation building and realization of national rejuvenation. We should better coordinate development and security. Security is the foundation for development, and stability is the precondition for prosperity. We should implement a holistic approach to national security and improve national security system, strengthen our capacity for safeguarding national security, and enhance public safety governance, as well as improve the social governance system, so as to guarantee a new development paradigm through new security endeavor. We should further advance the modernization drive in terms of national defense and military, and to turn the China's military into a great wall of steel that effectively safeguards national sovereignty, security, and development interests. We should make a solid strive in advancing the one China, two systems, and to realize national reunification. A strong country building cannot be realized without a long-term prosperity and stability in Hong Kong and Macau. We should fully, faithfully, and firmly implement one country, two systems, the people of Hong Kong governing Hong Kong and the people of Macau governing Macau, both with high degree of autonomy. It is imperative to act in strict compliance with China's constitution and basic laws of the two regions, and we will support Hong Kong and Macau in developing their economies, improving social well-being, and integrating their own development into overall development of the country. National reunification is the shared aspiration of sons and daughters of the Chinese nation, is the essence of national rejuvenation. We should implement our party's overall policy for resolving the Taiwan question in the new era. Uphold the One China principle and stick to the 1992 consensus. Promote peaceful development of cross-strait relations. We should resolutely oppose the interference of external forces and the secessionist activities of Taiwan independence. We should unswervingly advance the cause of national rejuvenation and reunification. We should strive to building a community of shared future for mankind. China's development benefits the world, and China's development cannot be realized without the participation of the world. We should make solid strides in advancing high-level opening up, and to better utilize the market and the resources internationally to develop our own development, but also at the same time promote common development around the world. We should hold high the banner of peace, development, cooperation, and mutual benefit. We should always stand at the right side of history, practice true multilateralism, observe the common values of humanity. We should actively participate in reform and construction of a global governance system and promote an open economy, and further practice a global development initiative and a global security initiative in a bid to inject more stability and positive energy into world peace and development, also fostering a favorable international environment for China's development. Fellow deputies, to governance a country, we should first governance the party. Only the party strive can the country be strong. To advance the construction of a strong nation, we should stick to and uphold the leadership of the Communist Party of China and the centralized unified leadership of the Party Central Committee, and strengthen the party building. We should always keep sober-minded and determined to solve the questions that are unique to such a big party like CPC, and also brave to take self-revolution, should make full and rigorous party self-governance as an unceasing mission. And we should firmly oppose corruption and always keep party solidarity and unity. By doing so, we have ensured that the party will never change its nature, its conviction, or its character, so that we can provide a strong guarantee for the undertaking of a strong nation and national rejuvenation.
各位代表
fellow deputies.
强国建设
The ambitious goals of making a country strong and realizing national rejuvenation are encouraging and inspiring. We must race against the time, stick to our historical confidence, enhance our historical initiative, and uphold fundamental principles and break new ground, maintain our strategic focus, carry forward the fighting spirit, and have the courage to overcome difficulties and continue to make new contributions to the great cause of a strong contributing and national rejuvenation. Thank you all.
Dear deputies, I echo and am in full alignment with President Xi's important speech, which showcased the people's standpoint, the confidence in our history, and the mission of our times, and will mobilize Chinese of all ethnicities to struggle and make great steps forward in building China into a strong country and achieving national rejuvenation. We must earnestly understand and comprehensively follow the spirit of his speech. During this conference, Comrade Xi Jinping was again elected unanimously as President of the People's Republic of China and the Chairman of its Central Military Commission, which reflected the common will of all the NPC deputies and the shared aspiration of Chinese of all nationalities. The party has established Comrade Xi Jinping as the core of the CPC Central Committee and the entire party, and established Xi Jinping's thoughts of socialism, of Chinese characteristics in a new era as the guiding philosophy of the nation. And this is of decisive significance to the undertakings of the party and the country in a new era and the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. We must firmly support the two establishments, strengthen the four consciousness, boost the four confidences, and practice the two upholds. This conference has followed the spirit of the Chinese Party Congress and its first and second plenary session. The conference has reviewed and adopted various reports and proposals, and elected and appointed in a legal manner the members of the new government. All the items on the agenda have been completed, so this is a conference of democracy, unity, practicality, and progress. During the conference, all the deputies have represented the interest of the people. They have exercised state powers in a legal manner and reflected the fundamental interests of the people and discuss the state affairs. This has showcased the advantage of the whole process people's democracy and demonstrated the strong resilience of the National People's Congress system. Over the past 5 years, under the strong leadership of CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, and under the auspices of Comrade Li Zhanshu, the 13th NPC and its Standing Committee followed the Xi Jinping thought of socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era, implemented the consensus of the working meetings of the 13th NPC, and fulfilled their responsibilities, focusing on state and party affairs. Important progresses in all respects have been made, which is a great contribution to the undertakings of the party and the state. Here, on behalf of the 14th National People's Congress and its Standing Committee, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to deputies of the 13th NPC and members of the 13th National People's Congress's Standing Committee, and let me also pay my highest tribute to Comrade Li Zhanshu. This conference has elected the Standing Committee of the 14th NPC and elected me as the chairman of the Standing Committee. I sincerely thank the trust of all the deputies, and I feel humbled in front of such high responsibilities. We will always uphold the comprehensive leadership of the party, unite and rely on NPC deputies and the general public, abide by the Constitution and the law, exercise state powers with integrity, and accept the supervision of the people, and make their contributions to the party and the country. And we will never let down the trust of people of all ethnicities in China. Dear deputies, the Chinese Party Congress drew the blueprint of building China into a great modern socialist country in all respects and advancing the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The 14th NPC and its Standing Committee will follow through the spirit of the Chinese Party Congress, fulfill the responsibilities entrusted by the Constitution and laws, uphold the organic unity of the party's leadership, the people being the masters of the country, and law-based governance, and develop, improve, and operate the NPC system, put on ground and achieve the important goals set by the Chinese Party Congress, and contribute to the building of China into a great modern socialist country. We must develop the whole process people's democracy and ensure that people can practice democratic elections and consultations, as well as decision-making, governance, and supervisions. We must improve the constitution-based systems and constantly improve the enforcement and supervision over constitutional enforcement, so as to write a new chapter of constitutional practice in China in a new era. We must also advance scientific, democratic, and law-based legislation, so as to make the socialist legal system more complete and authoritative, as it will empower development and ensure kind governance. It is important to put in place correct, effective, and law-based supervision so as to make sure that the Constitution and laws can be fully enforced, and that the government and government officials are subject to the supervision of the law. We must support all the deputies to exercise their power in a legal manner and leverage the advantage that our deputies are from the people and are rooted in the people, and that they can become important bridges between the state and the people. We must also comprehensively strengthen the self-improvement of the NPC and its standing committee and build a team that is politically committed to serving the people, upholding the rule of law and the spirit of democracy and diligence, and undertake the historic mission in a new era and on a new journey. Dear deputies, unity is strength, and hard work underpins great undertakings. Let us unite more firmly under the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, uphold the great banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and follow the guidance of Xi Jinping's thought of socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era, and the spirit of the 20th CPC National Congress. And let us be confident, innovative, committed, and let us get down to work to build China into a great modern socialist country in all respects and advance the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Dear deputies, the first session of the 14th National People's Congress has completed all the items on its agenda. Now please all rise and sing the national anthem. Now I declare that the first session of the 14th National People's Congress is officially closed.
The first session of the 14th National People's Congress has just concluded. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Zhao Leji, have addressed the closing meeting.
That's right, and NPC deputies passed by voting resolutions on the government work report on the implementation of the National Economic and Social Development Plan in 2022 and the plan for 2023, and also on the implementation of the central and local budgets in 2022 and the budgets for 2023.
Deputies approved the National Economic and Social Development Plan for this year and the central budget for the year 2023. They adopted resolutions on the work report of the 13th NPC Standing Committee, the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate, as well as a revision to the legislation law. Now, for more insight, let's talk to our studio guest, gentlemen. Chinese President Xi Jinping just addressed the closing meeting of the first plenary session of the 14th NPC. What are the highlights that impresses you the most, Professor Gao?
Well, first of all, let's really congratulate the successful conclusion of the first session of the 14th National People's Congress. A lot of work has been done, major breakthroughs have been made, and I think when I listened very carefully to President Xi Jinping's important speech before the official conclusion of the NPC, I think he really presented a very clear view of the tasks ahead of the Chinese nation for the coming 5 years. And when he talked about achieving the goal of building socialist strong China, for example, and also he touched upon the importance of anti-corruption, continued unrelentless campaign against corruption, making sure that the CPC remains always vigilant, always reinvigorated, and always being able to lead the Chinese nation in the final struggle before we achieve the socialist strong China, for example, and finally achieving the national rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. He also talked about the recent history, ever since the first Opium War all the way up to the founding of the Communist Party of China in 1921 and the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, for example. And this is what we call the 100 years of national humiliation. And President Xi Jinping emphasized that through the leadership of CPC, the Chinese nation have washed away this 100 years of national humiliation. And we need to work hard and really achieve what we call national rejuvenation. And without the strong leadership of the Communist Party of China, in China, we cannot achieve this very important mission. He also talked about all the other very important things, for example, building China through technology, the importance of achieving self-reliance and independence in major science and technological initiatives, for example, and also the Chinese growth need to be really driven by technological innovation and creativity. He also emphasized that the process leading towards the final national rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is irreversible. This is very important. And I think the whole Chinese nation, like me, we are very much confident that the coming 5 years will be very crucial, leading towards the final realization of this national dream, because as President Xi Jinping emphasized, for 100 years, the Chinese nation suffered all kinds of hardships, made all kinds of sacrifices, and eventually we got rid of the imperialist invasions, all kinds of wars, etc. We established stability, and we dedicated the whole nation to national economic development. And I think going forward, we will achieve even greater transformation of the Chinese economy, bringing more benefits for the Chinese nation. And President Xi Jinping also emphasized that the Chinese development is integrated with the rest of the world. So this is where the Chinese international responsibility kicks in. So it's very exciting, and I think the whole nation need to really study in greater depth what President Xi Jinping outlined as for the mission of the whole nation going forward, not only in the coming 5 years, but probably 10 years going forward too.
Yeah, and drawing lessons from history, President Xi Jinping really identified renewed missions for the country to go forward. And of course, these renewed missions comprise of many things, as Professor Gao just mentioned. And as the top leadership embarks on their new journey and their new 5-year term, they are expected to, turn these visions into actions. So, Mr. Brahm, what are some of the immediate priorities for the government?
Well, from President Xi's speech, it seems very clear that national rejuvenation and national reunification are side by side, if not one. And from that perspective, We, of course, have the Taiwan issue. And very clearly, a line has been drawn on that issue about non-interference from the outside in this issue. And that line and that statement of national unity on this topic has been made very, very clear, I think, to global audiences. Now, when we talk about security, however, it's not only military security. It also involves food security. We see a lot of now discussion coming out of the Congress concerning agricultural reforms, to assure that food security, water security, environmental policies, which are far more stricter than they've ever been, are going to be involved. And you also have health security. This is going to involve an overall reform of the healthcare system. With that, we also have environmental security. And all of these come down to really one issue, and that's technology. And the amount of investment that's going to be put into constructive technology, not just social media apps that distract people, but technology that can be applied to actually deal with issues of environment. Most environmental transitions from fossil fuel to green energy are dependent on data and technology, and of course this will depend upon finance. So we see also a lot of strengthening of the financial sector, financial supervision, which is absolutely essential to assure the development of technology. So you don't have something like the Silicon Bank fiasco taking place that could actually create or undermine all of this.
Yeah, and in this new strategy, really development and security, they are entwined. They really go hand in hand going forward. So President Xi Jinping says that the country will continue to work to realize national rejuvenation. Take a listen.
Citing the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation into an irreversible historical course. From now to the mid of this century, to build a modern socialist country in all respects and advance the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is the central task for the entire party and the whole Chinese people. The relay baton of a strong country building and realizing rejuvenation is now in the hands of our generation.
For more, let's cross live to our colleague Tian Wei, standing by at Great Hall of the People in central Beijing. Tian Wei, you've been following this very closely. What's your observation from the closing meeting of the first plenary session of the 14th NPC?
Pandeng, as being played earlier in our live broadcast, the quote coming from the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee and the President of the People's Republic of China, Mr. Xi Jinping, certainly the whole nation as a result of this session of the National People's Congress is rallying toward the idea of national rejuvenation, and the goal is very clear until the mid-century. Meanwhile, he clearly emphasized on the high-quality growth, new development paradigm, economic growth with both quantity and quality, as well as the scientific and technological self-reliance. All these are key, as he indicated in his speech at the closing ceremony. Now, this year's National People's Congress is certainly very crucial and will have substantive impact on China's future. It elected and appointed top leadership of the Chinese government. It approved the key legislations as well as documents, including legislation law amendment and also State Council institutional reform plan, as well as the government work report, which says 5% around that GDP growth rate for China. And they also emphasize on further opening and reform of China, which is sending clear message to the international investors and also the international community. Having said that, though, this specific National People's Congress for the year 2023 rallied the whole nation around the idea of Chinese modernization, which, according to its official description, very clearly said it's not equal to Westernization. Meanwhile, it is the way to achieve national rejuvenation. So this is a significant one. It will set the path for China for the next few years to come. Pandeng.
Yeah, and Tianwei, it's Mang Mang here. So Chinese Premier Li Qiang will soon meet the press and take questions from Chinese and foreign journalists. We see that you are already at the venue, packed with journalists home and abroad.
Yeah.
And this is really a chance for us to get up close to the Premier's thinking. What do journalists really expect from him?
Yes, indeed, Mama. As you observed very clearly, we see journalists just passing where I am, trying to find their best position to take pictures and videos of the Chinese Premier. Of course, this is the debut of the new Chinese Premier Li Qiang, who was appointed at the just concluded National People's Congress 2023. Of course, journalists from home and abroad have tremendous amounts of questions for him to get to know him, but also to get to know the realities of China and the future policies coming from the State Council. As we stated earlier, the around 5% GDP growth rate is certainly going to be the focus of attention. How to achieve that? Well, at the same time, to be able to reduce the chance of further inflation and also escalation of local government debts in China, particularly at a time when the uncertainties is rampant in the world with the collapse of SVB, the Silicon Valley Bank. Many are warned about the risks coming from the international market and also coming from the United States when it comes to financial risk. So China, how is it going to swim through this uncertain time? Meanwhile, China is also working on an aging population. As a result of that, how to create jobs, best quality jobs, and how to make sure there will be best welfare possible for the elderly generation. That will be certainly another challenge for the government, and also questions for the new Premier Li Qiang. And meanwhile, China is participating very actively in the global governance. As we know, this is 10th year of the Belt and Road Initiative. It is now focusing on green BRI and digital BRI. Meanwhile, China is also proposing the Global Development Initiative, which is another important contribution by China. So how is China going to do that? That will be all requiring detailed plans coming from the Chinese government and further implementation of that. Not to mention the State Council Institutional Reform Plan that has been approved by the just concluded NPC, touch on so many areas: science and technology development, financial risks management, data management, rural rejuvenation, just a few. But all these detailed policies are not out yet. So people are looking for clues as to what the Chinese Premier would have in mind as to what might be some of the detailed policies forward. Another point, very important, is the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. China pledged to achieve before 2030 carbon peaking. City of Shanghai, for example, has been working very hard, of 24 million people, in order to achieve that before the year 2030. But that is only one of the mega cities in China. There are also very different issues facing different localities of China. So how is China going to work that out? All of this is within the context of an ever-changing international environment, of tremendous challenge of some kinds of geopolitical competition, and some trying to use ideology to divide the world. So how the Chinese Premier, with his job, trying to work with his team to deal with these problems, and also the whole Chinese nation, those will be among many of the questions being raised by the press. Before we go, just look around me. You see the cameramen already standing on their ladders trying to get the best position for the first debut of the Chinese Premier Li Qiang, who will come out and meet the press in few minutes.
Yeah, quite a few issues to be addressed there. We're just moments away from that news conference by China's new Premier Li Qiang. Thank you so much, Tianwei, for bringing us that. And that, of course, is one of the most anticipated events at every year's two sessions.
That's right, and CGTN will bring you live coverage on that. Now, at the just concluded first plenary session of the NPC, Chinese President Xi Jinping also stressed the importance of pushing forward high-quality development as China embarks on a journey to build itself into a strong country and realize national rejuvenation.
On the new journey toward such goals, We should unswervingly uphold high-quality development. We should apply new development philosophy in full in the right way and in all fields of endeavor. Speed up to foster a new development paradigm and further implement the strategy of developing the country through science and education and the strategy of strengthening the country through talents and also promote innovation-driven development. And we should also enhance science and technology, self-reliance and strengths, promote industrial transformation and upgrading, advance urban, rural, and regional coordinated development, and to see that the economic and social development in a green and low carbon manner. And we should also to realize that our economy achieve the effective increase in quality and the reasonable growth in its quantity. So by doing so, we can keep increasing our country in terms of economic and technological strength and composite national strengths.
China's high-speed rail network is a symbol of its drive to modernization. Over 20 provinces in the country are linked in a network of more than 10,000 kilometers. Richard Ente takes a ride on board link between Beijing and Shanghai on one of the world's fastest trains.
Crowds of people gather at Beijing Nan Station in the city's south.
Wow, I told you this place was ultra-modern. I'm running a bit late, but I'm not worried because I see a sea of people, and I know that in the peak of its season, the Chinese New Year, for example, over 3.6 million people departed from this very station efficiently. It was launched in 2008, early August, and it still looks brand new. Let's take a look at where my fellow passengers are departing from.
Streams of people effortlessly pass through the station thanks to the use of modern technology, scanners, AI, and facial recognition.
I gotta get to Shanghai, 1,300 kilometers away, but I'll be fine. 350 kilometers at its maximum speed. I get to Shanghai in just 4.5 hours. Now, I've never been on a spaceship and I've never been teleported before, but this has got to be the closest thing. This bad boy takes you straight to the city center.
So, why do people in China prefer traveling by high-speed rail?
We think high-speed rail is much safer than airplanes. There's also the convenience. Assuming you are flying, then you may need to consider whether there will be traffic jams from your home to the airport.
Our country's high-speed railway is safe, fast and convenient and comfortable. So we like it better.
Staring out the windows is like having courtside seats to visuals of China that a camera just cannot do justice to. Inside the cabin, I see complex technological features made simple. And there's an overwhelming sense of comfortability that jumps right at you. In the seating arrangements, for instance, built for relaxation, even for a 6'2" guy such as myself, it's comfortable, it's spacious, and it's neat.
Speaking of comfort, it's a smooth ride all the way, even as the train exceeds 300 kilometers per hour.
Well, there you have it, dependable and reliable. 4.5 hours later, we arrive in Shanghai from Beijing. This is just one line in a national speed network that has brought greater prosperity and mobility for the public. As they say in China, Zhaijian.
Richard Ente, CGTN, Shanghai.